Well, hi, folks. Stu Bamey coming to you from Pawleys Island, South Carolina. I have a question for you. Have you ever noticed how much of life can be summarized in a single soundbite? A soundbite takes a complex concept or idea, and it breaks it down into a few simple words that are clear, concise, and easy to remember. You'll know these from history. Martin Luther King, I have a dream. JFK, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Good reminder today, isn't it? Ronald Reagan, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. And who would ever forget Apollo 13? Houston, we have a problem. Now, in this message, I want to look at some sound bites surrounding the resurrection of Jesus for you and for me. And they're really powerful little sound bites that we can easily remember when we come to this message of an Easter Sunday resurrection and Jesus rising from the dead. Matthew writes in chapter 28, verse 1, now after the Sabbath, toward the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. Okay, let's place where we are. It's after the Sabbath. The Sabbath is Saturday. It is the last day of the week for the Hebrews. Now, Matthew tells us it's the first day of the week, which for them was Sunday. And on Sunday, the first day of the week, which becomes the Lord's Day, the day of the resurrection, in the pre-dawn hours, after Jesus has died and been buried, two women make their way to the tomb. Mary Magdalene, who was set free from a lifetime of emotional pain. I love her story that Jesus just sets her free. She couldn't find an answer anywhere else but in the loving care and grace of Jesus. And then there's Mary, the wife of Clopas, the mother of James. These two women are absolutely devastated at the death of Jesus. They had all of their dreams and their hopes and their future wrapped up in him, and now he has died. So they want to honor him, and they want to come and anoint his dead body with spices. I always find it interesting, by the way, that when it came to the resurrection, who were the first people that Jesus wanted to know about the resurrection? It wasn't the high priest, the Sanhedrin, even his followers. Women. Women were so valuable and important to Jesus. He's making a big, big statement here. So they arrive at the tomb. There is no question that Jesus is dead. He has been rotting. His body is decaying for 3 full days. So they want to clean the body and anoint it with spices. But when they get there, they have two big problems. Two big problems. How to get past the Roman soldiers who are guarding the tomb, and how to move the massive stone so that they can get in and anoint the body. They're just two women. Matthew writes in chapter 28, verse 2, after they're there at the tomb, realizing they've got some big problems, and behold, there was a great earthquake. For an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothing white as snow. Listen to this. On the way to the graveyard, there is a seismo, a great shaking, a seismograph, a shaking of the ground. People didn't understand why that happened in those days. So they are terrified. They're stumbling around. They're falling over each other in the dark. And then an angel comes and rolls back the massive stone that sealed the tomb, the grave. And not only moves that big stone, don't know how it was moved. It was a big stone. You couldn't move it. Nobody wanted to get into there. The Romans wanted to protect that body, that dead body in there. But the angel not only removed the stone, but it sat on the stone. So problem one is gone. The tomb is opened. And how about this angel? The appearance is like lightning. That word like means it's a metaphor. I can't really describe it. There's no human words to describe it. It was a blinding light, like a flashing light, like the darting light of a lightning bolt. It's the only way I could explain it. And the clothing of this angel, it appeared to us as white as snow, pure, uncontaminated, holy, glorified. What an event is taking place. He continues in verse 4, and for fear of him, the guards trembled and became like dead men. Now you've got to love this. Problem 2, the soldiers are guarding, these tough warrior-like soldiers of the Roman Empire are guarding the tomb. But when they saw the angel, when they felt the seismos, the earthquake, the ground shaking, they were like dead men. I love this. They're in shock. They're speechless. They're gasping for breath. These feared warriors are rendered helpless by the angel of God. They're afraid. They're horrified. And who would blame them? Because what's taking place here is unprecedented in the history of the world. So the 2 problems are gone. Problem 1, the big stone. Problem 2, these fierce warriors. They're gone. Now, Matthew continues to write in verse 5. And the angel said to the women, do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he has risen. As he said, come see the place where he lay. Okay, let's talk about some sound bites here, some big sound bites. The first sound bite is this: do not be afraid. Present imperative, a command. Do not be afraid. The angel is speaking now to the women, not to the soldiers. And he's talking about fear, because there's the darkness, there's the earthquake, there are the soldiers, there's the death of Jesus. They're filled with anxiety and stress. They're wondering and worried and what's going to happen, and they're afraid. They're stumbling around in the dark. Have you ever noticed, interestingly, this is really interesting, have you ever noticed how much fear dominates the events surrounding the resurrection? And it's because there's a lot to be afraid about. It's why we have fear in our lives, because there's a lot to be afraid about. Bad things can happen. And here on this day, at this moment, on this morning, there is the darkness, the earthquake, the veil of the temple's been torn in two. There are strangers, the saints, walking around. We talked about this last week. In the tomb, strange things are beginning to appear that are going to walk into Jerusalem on this morning. So this is just absolute craziness. Nothing like this has ever happened before. They're all afraid. They're all afraid. I don't have to spend much time convincing you and me of the demoralizing, destructive, suffocating power of fear in our lives. It is a powerful emotion. It's tyrannizing, debilitating to our thoughts, our minds, our hearts, our imagination, our lives. This thing we call fear. If I asked you, what are you most frightened about at this very moment, what would you say? Maybe it's been a past hurt, or a rejection, or a betrayal by a close friend or marriage partner. Maybe you're afraid of being alone and what it's going to be like to have no one around you. Or maybe it's the fear of failure. It's a big one, you know. Or your financial troubles. Or it's just you're afraid of some things in the future. The question I'm asking is, what's got you and me on the run? Because we all have things that go bump in the dark. We got a good taste of that with COVID-19. I remember the early days of that and all the news conferences. The fear of the unknown was debilitating. It was tyrannizing. This sickness that nobody really understood, the quarantining, the isolation, that loved ones were dying alone and we could only wave to them through windows. There was a lot of fear in people's lives, in your life and in mine. It is a powerful emotion. It has a direct effect on how we feel, what our attitudes are, and what our behavior is in this life. I mean, think of how many times fear controls your life and mine. So on that resurrection day, the first response was fear, that something really bad had happened. Have you ever wondered why we call Good Friday good? It's not good. Something very bad happened. But out of something very bad, God does something very good. And it's the same with your life and mine. Out of the very, very bad things, God over time, in his way, beneath the surface, in the providence of God, his hand is always working. And he is bringing about something very good from what we might see as something very bad. Think about that, of something very bad that's happening in your life. God, what are you trying to say to me? How are you going to shape that and mold that in me and in the events surrounding me into something very, very good? What are you trying to teach me? What are you trying to build in me? What kind of character qualities are you trying to put into my inner core, my sense of being inside, to grow me up into full maturity? You know, God may be silent in your life this very moment, but he is never still. And God may seem to be silent there on that first Sunday in the dark with the tomb, with the soldiers, and with the earthquake, but he is never, ever still. You'll see. God is going to teach all of us a great lesson. So the first soundbite is do not be afraid. Wherever you are at this very moment, do not be afraid. It's a command of God because I'm going to do something. Why should we not be afraid? Second soundbite, he is not here, he is risen. I mean, what's the good out of the bad that God is doing here? Why no fear? Because he has risen. And if God, listen to this, if God has the power to overcome death, then he has the power to overcome all of life, every detail of life, every detail of your life and my life. I mean, here's the deal. If God resurrected Jesus from the dead, if he was in fact alive, a bodily resurrection, not just his spirit, but a real resurrection, that means that God has power over death. Something we have no power over. I just did a memorial service for a woman in Pittsburgh. You know, 91 years, a really, really close friend. There's something irreversible and hard about a person dying, but we know that God is really seeing that as a time of a family reunion, that death is not the end of life. It's just the beginning of life, really. It's a new life. Out of something very, very bad, God does something very, very good. He welcomes a person, ushers them in. The minute they close their eyes in this world, they're looking directly into the eyes of Jesus in the next world. It's something very, very good. God does it. He has that power to overcome death, the biggest obstacle of all. And if he has that power, he's got the power to overcome every obstacle that you and I are facing this very moment in our lives. Yes, he does. Christianity stands or falls on the veracity, on the truth of a bodily resurrection, that it's not just a spiritual experience or a near-death experience, but it's true. It's reality. It's the X factor. It's the life-changing factor. It's the great paradigm shift. Jesus has overcome death. He is not here. He is risen. No one has ever escaped from the power of death except Jesus. By coming back from the dead, Jesus of Nazareth clearly outdistances himself from every other religious leader who's ever lived. Muhammad, tomb, grave, occupied. Confucius, occupied. Buddha, occupied. They all have occupied signs over their grave. You remember the great escape artist Harry Houdini? He said that he would return from the dead on the anniversary of his death. And every year, people gather together to see Harry Houdini rise again. But so far, he's a no-show. But not Jesus. He's different from every single other person. He is resurrected. He is alive. So fear not, the angels say. He is not here. He has risen. I mean, what does it mean if Jesus is really risen from the tomb? What does that really mean for your life and mine? It is the X factor. It does change everything that we know or believe or do. The present imperative command: stop being afraid. He is risen. He is not here. So fear not. Okay, the final soundbite. I mean, we have do not be afraid. He is not here. He is risen. Why not be afraid? Because he's here. He has risen. The X factor. Do you believe that? I mean, if he has risen from the dead, life has changed. Everyday life for you and me, and eternal life for you and me. And 3, come and see the place where he laid. I love this. How do you know that he is risen. Come and see. I invite you to investigate the place where he was laid. The stone is gone, not so that Jesus could be let out, but so that God could let us in to see the empty tomb. The body is gone. He is indeed factually, bodily, resurrected from the grave. This is not just wishful thinking from a group of weak women who are trying to grasp some hope. This is not a resuscitation. It's not just that near-death experience. He was dead for 3 full days, rotting in a tomb, not just a couple moments or a couple minutes or maybe even an hour. No, he was dead. And what I love about this is that the evidence for the bodily resurrection is overwhelming. It is beyond reasonable doubt. You can read books, get Lee Strobel's books on the evidence for the resurrection, Josh McDowell, Evidence That Demands a Verdict. There's book after book after book. There's video after video. If you investigate, if you look, if you get online and you look for the evidences, you will find that they are convincing beyond a shadow of a doubt. And I want you to do that. If you don't believe in Jesus, I want you to investigate. Investigate this week. Look for those evidences. Look for people who have presented the case for the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So here, now, we have breaking news. We have evidence, come and see, of the resurrection. We have, in that day, names and numbers. We're told that over 500 eyewitnesses saw Jesus. Can you imagine? This is like historical gold. Can you imagine getting 500 witnesses together and they all confirm, yes, we saw him, we talked with him, he was dead, and now he's alive. So look it. We don't have to live very long in this world to realize that good news rarely comes from a graveyard. But on that first Easter, on that first day of the week, that is exactly what happened. And that truth remains for you and for me for all of history. Fear not. Why? He is risen. He is not here. Don't believe it? Come and see. Investigate. Look for yourselves. 3 great sound bites. Do not be afraid. He is not here. He is risen. Come and see the place where he lay. That Easter and this Easter, Jesus speaks with more power and authority into our lives, into your life and mine, than ever before. Fear not. He is risen. Come and see. Some of you have asked, hey, how do I get notifications? How do I know about these messages every week? Well, I send out a little personal email. It's no big deal. You can sign up for it at consequentialchristianity.com. You just hit the sign up button, add in your email address. You can unsubscribe anytime you want, but that's how you'll know what we're doing about these messages, about events, and about our Luther and Paul trips. So sign up. Go to consequentialchristianity.com.